President Trump calling out the findings of the Inspector General's report.
This report has great information, but comes to the wrong conclusion. Of course, these FBI agents use their personal bias.
Clearly, there was bias from the top of the House through the investigative team. The Inspector General did outline some actions that were taken.
It totally exonerates me. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. And if you read the report, you'll see that.
What is going on behind the scenes at the FBI? Why did they wait this long?
I think that James Comey was unfair to the people of this country. I think what he did was a disgrace.
If we make a mistake, we're going to confront it.
The policy on the border is a policy that began under Barack Obama, which is separating children from their families.
I hate the children being taken away. The Democrats have to change their law. That's their law.
It's important to recognize that these laws have been on the books for quite some time.
The U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills Golf Club in New York. This is one of the toughest courses in the world.
Not a fan of this song.
You know, it's so much music out there. Who are Fitz and the who?
Ritz and the Tantrums.
Never heard of them.
They rock. Not quite like the Three Doors Down concert we had yesterday.
But you've heard of them.
No, I've never heard of them. I'm lying. But it's Saturday morning.
Ritz and his Tantrums. I'm sure they're wonderful people.
You know what? If you have a song you want us to play, email us, friends@foxnews.com. Yeah. I think our viewers should all have a say in the music that we wake up and listen to in the morning.
This is a democracy.
Because it really has an impact on your mood.
Well,
actually, you find when you wake up, like the first song you choose to listen to, it's important. It's an important decision.
I woke up to Despacito this morning. Was my
That's a good one.
It's a good one, right? It starts with like a little bit of like guitar work.
Yeah.
It's delightful.
That is good. What did I listen to?
So is this coffee.
Florida Georgia Line was my choice this morning.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen.
What was yours? We hope we are your soundtrack of waking up, right? You're just kind of waking up. Maybe you set your alarm to 8 o'clock Eastern time. You want to join us. You're not getting out of bed. You're not getting dressed. Don't listen to Brian Kilmeade. Don't do any of those things. Stay in bed. Maybe make your kid get you a coffee. You know, run them around, make them do your dirty work for you, and then watch the show.
My daughter's not old enough yet to do that.
Someday.
I can't wait for those days. But there is some news that may want you to get out of bed this morning, because there are a lot of people pretty irate about what we've now found, Griff, in this IG report.
And we have, and you know, that is the news, and I have read all 568 pages. We're going to bring this
get to that. But there's also a lot going on with immigration. That has been something that has divided this country for a while now. But if you go on Twitter or you just go online and read some of the headlines, and my husband came home last night and he goes, what on earth is going on? Are kids being put in cages? Like, I don't understand. The headlines that I'm reading seem absolutely absurd. And the reason people are confused is because if you listen to some in the media, they will tell you things like this.
It's not the law. It is their interpretation of the law. We are, or used to be, America's greatest democracy. We can't find a solution to this problem without harming children, without putting them into concentration camps.
I call this a concentration camp for kids, because that's exactly what it's turning out to. When you give kids 22 hours of lockup time and 2 hours of air time, what else can it be? And if this is where this country is going, the American people need to wake up and pay attention, because your kids could be next.
Michael Steele, please. Concentration camps. Think about the verbiage, the phraseology, the implications historically of what a concentration camp has meant. Whether it is the truest historical reference of Nazi concentration camps, we were gassing people, gassing Jews, or Japanese internment camps, which we were choosing one country in World War II. In this particular case, we're enforcing the laws on the books for kids who are being treated very, very humanely because they didn't break the law. Their parents did, or whoever told them to come here did. And as a result, we're being told that they're in cages by enforcing a policy that existed before this administration. And yet this administration is saying we have to create a disincentive for people to come here illegally and use kids as a vehicle to do so. And last hour I laid out the schedule for these kids, which includes school for many hours, recreation, soccer, movie night, meals, snacks, video games, pool tables. And these kids are not being locked up. They're being taken care of until they can be reunited with a caretaker or their parent.
So this rhetoric is over the top, undeniably, to make that comparison. But as Abby brought up, you know, what is the policy? And this is why you wake up and tune into this show, because we get get you answers that you need, the information, the facts, and that is this law has origins under Bill Clinton's administration in 1997, extended under Bush, under Obama, and is now having a zero tolerance alteration to it. But we asked the Deputy Commissioner Ronald Vitello of the Customs and Border Protection, specifically in the past hour, what is the real fact with this law? Here is what he said.
These laws have been on the books for quite some time. The population that we're arresting comes as part of a family or a child alone. The child obviously cannot be prosecuted, but when the family member brings them through this arduous journey, putting them in danger, crossing the border illegally, we refer that parent for prosecution. The children are then taken to these HHS shelters, and they're both given instructions to how to contact each other once the court adjudication takes place. Most of these kids that will go to the shelter will be placed with a family member in the United States. We're trying to apply a consequence to crossing the border illegally.
I thought the most absurd example over the past week of this conversation on immigration was that press briefing. I think it was on Thursday, where Sarah Huckabee Sanders was pressed by a CNN reporter, and he was basically shouting at her. He said, "You're a mother. You're a mother. Do you not have a heart? Do you not care about these children?" She had to basically calm down that room, almost like they were her children. Like, calm down here. And that is the problem right now, is the narrative there. If you are a Republican, it seems today, and you want for stronger border security, you don't have a soul, you don't have a heart, you want these children to be ripped out from their parents' arms. The president has said himself, he said this yesterday on the North Lawn, no one wants kids to be separated from their parents. I do think the president has an opportunity to get out in front of this, maybe to speak to the nation,
He's already said,
write some powerful words.
Pass the law, change the law. I'll enforce.
But help the country understand what's going on, because all you have right now are these headlines and the media giving their own perspective, talking about concentration camps.
You know what the nuts part is people aren't dumb. Like, the media are the dumb ones. Michael Steele, you're a smart man. You know what a concentration camp looks like. One man's concentration camp, according to Michael Steele, is another man's shelter. So these kids are going in, they're being taken care of by our government, fed, clothed, provided for, helped to contact their parents to be reunited, and it's the parents who are held responsible. You broke the law and put your kid in jeopardy by crossing that border without waiting in line, without taking the proper process. That's where the finger should be pointed, and this administration happens to be the one that says, we're going to enforce that law and do so humanely. Yet this is what the Democrats smell. They've got a campaign talking point. They want Medicare for all, and Trump puts kids in cages. Right. That's what they want. That's what they're going to run on in the midterm election. People are not dumb. They realize that's not the truth. And the reality is we're enforcing laws, treating kids humanely, and you got to get past the headlines.
It's not sustainable, though, right, Griffin? That is what Republicans on the Hill are trying to figure out. So they're going to look at immigration. You can expect that to happen next week. But what do? You've got hundreds of kids being separated from their parents every single week. I think it's up to 2,000 over the last 6 weeks. So this is going on. What do we do about it as a nation? It's a tough conversation to have, and I do think the president has a moment here to try and figure out how we move forward as a country on immigration. It doesn't mean it can't be tough.
There's competing immigration bills coming out, and both of them include funding for the border wall. Right. Have a wall, solve the problem, then people can come here legally.
Well, and I think, Ron Vitello, the deputy commissioner, also pointing out the impact that this rhetoric is having on agents down on the border, men and women who just are carrying out the law. But that's not the only story in Washington, because I have read the 568 pages of the IG report, so you would not have to.
Griff did.
Griff's notes. And, we have talked a lot about it. You've heard what's going on. James Comey was insubordinate. But, one of the things that's going to move forward, Abby, in this week in the hearing before the Senate on Monday and before the House on Tuesday is Peter Strzok, that agent that had the 10,000 plus text messages with Lisa Page.
It's a job, too.
With him, he was having an affair. And the fact that Peter Strzok said will stop them in reference to President Trump's campaign. That takeaway everyone has heard. And whether anything is done, this individual who saw himself as a future deputy director, according to these text messages, is still drawing a paycheck working in the HR department. The question many are asking this morning is why.
Unbelievable. So Peter Strzok, so the text message you've all seen by now, how he was working hard to get Trump, at the time he was candidate, Donald Trump, away from winning the presidency. He was head of the Clinton probe, one of the top people there, then also one of the top folks dealing with this Russian investigation. As you said, he's still employed. He still works in the HR department. He's still getting paid by taxpayer money.
That's right.
Unbelievable. So that is a big question. Why is he still there? But also, should there be consequences for the other people that were involved, the other agents that that are in this report that talked about President Trump, that talked about the people that support the president in such a negative way. Department that should never be political. Should we just all move on from this and say, okay, let's just learn from our mistakes, or should action be taken? That is the question that will be asked next week.
If you ask former FBI agents like Terry Churchy, who was on our air, he says absolutely should be held accountable. And remember, while Horowitz's IG report says that Comey wasn't influenced by bias, he left the door open that Strzok may have been with regards to placing a higher priority on the Russia investigation.
Just like watching the Horowitz report come out was just like watching the Comey press conference. President Trump said it yesterday. He's totally right. I'm going to spend 15 minutes talking about why she's guilty and then exonerate her. The Horowitz report, I'm going to spend 567 pages talking about how biased they are and say maybe bias isn't what happened. It's amazing, and it really infects a department which most people at the FBI do a great job.
We'll see.
The problem is at the top, there was an inclination.
The president pointed that out yesterday. The president pointed that out. There are over 100,000 people within DOJ. Many of them are doing the job well, and they aren't political. So it's sad that they have to deal with this. But Michael Horowitz will be in the hot seat, as well as Christopher Wray, who runs the FBI Monday and
he's got another report coming out, so he can, you know, exonerate himself.
All right. Well, we are digesting all this morning, but there is still other news going on. I want to bring you some headlines, starting with a Fox News alert. A second sheriff's deputy dying overnight after being attacked by an inmate. Teresa King and Patrick Rohr shot and killed in Kansas City. Investigators believe the suspect grabbed one of their guns, and they escorted him into court.
We heard a shot. We heard boom. I seen an officer shot in his head, and I seen another officer losing his life on the floor.
King was a 13-year veteran of the force. Rohr served 7 years. The suspect, Antoine Fielder, also was shot. He has a long criminal history, including murder charges. Also, a man under arrest after barricading himself inside an armored car near the Hoover Dam. The suspect, who may have been armed, stopping traffic in the homemade vehicle. Police say that he taped notes to his window addressed to the president, with one reading this: "Release the OIG report." Police say the suspect, identified as Matthew Wright from Nevada, surrendered after a car chase. His motive still unclear. So bizarre. And this is why you don't park in front of fire hydrants. Crews in New Jersey sharing this picture of a hose running right through a car. Firefighters forced to break its windows to position the hose correctly, since, of course, there was no time to get a tow. Because it was an emergency, the firefighters are off the hook for the damage.
That's what you get.
It's so hard because it's always the only space that's open. You know, you're driving down to get a space, and you're like, oh, I hope there's not a fire hydrant there. But there's a reason why you don't do it.
In the news in Washington doesn't stop there. Coming up, former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort sent to jail. Alan Dershowitz says the judge's move is obnoxious to our Constitution. He's next.
And liberal comedians ramping up their anti-Trump attacks as if they could ramp it up. Kathy Griffin slamming fellow comedian Kevin Hart for not targeting President Trump. Former home improvement star Zachary Ty Bryan, he's a Hollywood conservative who's had enough of stories like this. He joins us live, coming up. Welcome back. Well, former Trump campaign manager briefly sent to jail ahead of his September trial.
Our next guest calls the judge's move obnoxious to our Constitution.
Here to explain, Harvard Law professor emeritus, lifelong Democrat, and the author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump, Alan Dershowitz. Professor, good morning.
Good morning.
What is your reaction to this development?
Well, you know, there are thousands of people today in jail before they've been convicted of any crime, many of them minorities, many of them poor. Now Paul Manafort joins them based on an indictment. And indictments are not supposed to have any real impact. We still have a presumption of innocence. Under the law, Manafort is no more guilty of contacting witnesses or attempting to obstruct justice than any of us. The government says he did it. He says, no, he didn't do it. He didn't know there were witnesses, and his conversations were entirely innocent. Why does the government get to win without a hearing or without a trial? Why do they get to put him in jail where there's going to be an enormous pressure on him, not only to sing, but perhaps even to compose, as one of the judges put it? I think it's very, very unfair. He's not the only person in jail today for being indicted. There are tens of thousands of people.
So, Professor,
there's something very wrong with a system that presumes guilt this way?
Well, is this part of a public show, a demonstration that they're cracking down on Trump, that the noose is tightening? Is this part of composing?
Well, it's part of pressure. If Paul Manafort were not part of the campaign, nobody would have ever looked into his background, his lobbying. Nobody would be monitoring and finding out whether he's calling witnesses. It's the most natural thing in the world when you're under investigation to see if maybe the witnesses should tell the truth. I'm a lawyer. I know you're not supposed to do that. But most people don't understand that. And before he's put in jail, there should have been an evidentiary hearing, a mini trial, in which he could present his defense, he could call witnesses, and only then do you put somebody in jail. But, you can get the grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, as the chief judge of New York once did. Prosecutors just play with grand juries. They tell them what to do. There are 23 chairs lined up to be moved around by prosecutors. And the idea that we now put people in jail based on what a grand jury does, hearing only one side of the case, not the only side of the case, really is obnoxious to our Constitution.
Yeah. I want your thoughts, because we've been talking about the IG report all morning, and we had Rudy Giuliani on yesterday, and he says that they are doubling down and they don't really want to cooperate moving forward because they feel that it was tainted, that the early days we now know, Peter Strzok, who was leading the early Russian investigation during the campaign, now we know how he truly felt about the president and other high-up agents, how they felt. Do you think the president and his team are making the right move by saying, how can we take this seriously? We now know the real motives from the beginning.
I think the more important thing is the IG report makes it clear that there was a justification for firing Comey. Comey is really the villain of the report. For his own personal benefit, reputational benefit, he tried to have it both ways. He thought Hillary Clinton would win the election, therefore he would provide information against her, and then if she won the election, the Trump people couldn't complain. It was just completely designed to help his reputation. And he should have been fired. Hillary Clinton would have fired him. President Trump should have fired him on day one. And once the president has some justification for engaging in actions under Article 2 of the Constitution, you can't start questioning his motive. Did he also have another reason? Was he happy that he was fired so that the Russia thing could come to an end? Once we start probing the motivations of presidents, we're doing law by psychoanalysis rather than law by actions.
Interesting stuff. All right, Professor, thank you. We've got to leave it there, but a lot to think about.
Always good to see you, Professor.
It was all based on the fact that Hillary Clinton would win. All of it.
All right, well, still to come, Hollywood elite cannot stop using vulgar language to attack the president. Our next guest is a Hollywood conservative who has had enough.
One thing, Trump. It's no longer down with Trump, it's Trump.
Some quick headlines. A detective rushed to the hospital when a wild chase ends in a head-on collision. A carjacking suspect slamming into a cop car, causing it to roll over in Palm Beach County, Florida. Police say the suspect also shot at them during the chase. He's now under arrest. The injured detective is expected to survive. In this, a man faces DUI charges after his horse tramples a little boy. The horse running over the child and breaking his legs. Police say the rider was drunk when he lost control of the horse at a parade in California. Abby, Pete?
Oh, Griff, that's a horrible story. Thank you. All right, once again this week we saw a liberal in Hollywood attack President Trump. This time it was Robert De Niro cursing him out at the Tony Awards. Watch.
I'm going to say one thing, Trump. It's no longer down with Trump, it's
Very original. Well, some conservatives in Hollywood, they've had enough, including our next guest. You know best from when he starred in the hit sitcom Home Improvement. Actor and producer Zachary Ty Bryan joins us now. Zachary, thanks for being here this morning. Really appreciate it. We're all big fans of the show.
We grew up watching you.
100%. We all did. So we're all fanning out here. Absolutely. So you follow Hollywood. You're part of it. Is it just predictable at this point, unoriginal? What do you make of the hysteria?
Well, you know, I think Hollywood they're just kind of in this echo chamber. You know, it's kind of similar to like the establishment in Washington. I feel that they've kind of just never thought that they were penetratable, and they had this agenda of Barack for 8 years and going right into Hillary for the next 4 to 8 years. And then you had President Donald Trump come along and win the election, so it kind of caught everybody off guard. And I think we're kind of seeing their reaction, and it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, I imagine, though, being in Hollywood, you're only allowed, from what we see from afar, you are only allowed to have sort of one perspective. It has to be anti-Trump. You've got to be angry. You've got to be upset about what's going on. What's it like for you? Because you're someone that has different political opinions. You grew up outside of the Hollywood media elite. You know, you grew up on a farm. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, my family's originally from southeastern Colorado. We grow wheat, corn, and milo. Yeah, it is different. I mean, surprisingly, there's a lot more conservatives in Hollywood than you would expect. They don't necessarily talk about it. They stay more anonymous. But you know, it reminds me kind of high school. You know, you've got the cool clique. They think everybody should be like them, and the party of tolerance and acceptance is only accepting if you agree with them.
Of course, if you're part of the groupthink, it's absolutely
right. There's this new wave. The pendulum is swinging the other way, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
So part of the anti-pendulum, of course, is Kathy Griffin. She famously held up the bloody head of our president. She's now attacking Kevin Hart, a black comedian, funny guy, because he doesn't hate Trump enough. Listen to what Kathy Griffin said about Kevin Hart. She said, look, if you want to not hear about Trump at all, go see Kevin Hart. He doesn't even mention Trump. I personally think that's a bleep move because he's a black man, but I guess he's selling more tickets than I ever will. So Kevin Hart has decided my stand-up routine doesn't need to be about President Trump. There's plenty of things to laugh about, yet that's not okay.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know his political beliefs, but I appreciate that he doesn't throw it in our faces. I'm a fan of his. And it just it's funny to me with Kathy Griffin, and I hate even legitimizing her with what she did. It actually really irks me. But it's kind of funny to think that you should have a political stance just because of the color of your skin. Which is supposedly what they're very much against. So for me, I'm a big fan of his. He makes me laugh, and I'm just glad that I get to go watch him either in stand-up or in one of his films and laugh and get away from the world, because that's ultimately what our business is here for, not to express our political opinion.
That's so true. I mean, that was something that I loved about Home Improvement, the show that we all know you from. As we said, we grew up on that show. It was about family values, and it highlighted what so many families go through, the ups and the downs. Do you think we're going to see more shows like that on television? Because I think there is such a need for that today. You can take the politics out of it, but get back to just families being a family.
Absolutely, that's what I loved about Home Improvement. I thought that at the end of every episode, you kind of walked with a moral lesson. I think you will start to see that. You know, they're bringing Tim Allen's show back to Fox, Last Man Standing, which I'm really happy for him. And yeah, I think you're going to start to see. I mean, you know, we're kind of living in two different countries. You've got Middle America, and then you've kind of got these big cities. And I think with Roseanne, you kind of saw in Hollywood that there is this demographic that really needs to be reached. It was unfortunate with what Roseanne said and did, but I think you'll start to see that, and we need to start getting back to kind of our traditional values, in my opinion, because we've lost that, and a lot of things happening in the world, I think, are because of losing that family family background.
That's such a good point. Zachary, great having you. Can you come back sometime?
Please do.
I would love to. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Count
and happy Father's Day.
Come to New York sometime, too. You got it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I would love to.
Yeah. So fun seeing him after all these years, right?
Good guy, yeah.
All right, Lindsey Graham sending a strong message to his critics.
If you don't like me working with President Trump to make the world a better place, I don't give
Leave it to Lindsey Graham. Should more people have that kind of attitude? That's next.
That is fantastic. Plus, the U.S. Open is in full swing. Dustin Johnson leading the way while some of golf's biggest stars, well, they missed the cut. A live report from the links coming up.
I like the president. I trust him in terms of trying to do things that are big and matter. Well, I'll tell him when I think he's wrong, but let me just tell you about the critics. When I worked with President Obama, and I did on occasion, I was a hero. Now, when I work with President Trump, I'm two-faced. He's been a friend to me, and he says some things I don't agree with. So if you don't like me working with President Trump to make the world a better place, I don't give
You can say what you want about Lindsey Graham, but you cannot argue that he is honest. He's very real. He sticks to his guns on the issues that he cares about. And I think his philosophy is, whether it's Barack Obama in office, whether it's Donald Trump, they are the president. I've got to find ways to work with them on things that I agree with, on things that I don't agree with. I'm going to speak out on that.
Well, yeah, and, you know, Senator Graham is a bit of an independent voice in Washington. We've seen over the years. And what he was really addressing was that, you know, he's considered a hawk when it comes to military issues, when it comes to North Korea. And he has been praising the president for the diplomatic breakthrough, the prospect of peace on the Korean Peninsula. And he's clearly not afraid to speak his mind.
You know, I've had the good fortune of getting to know Colonel Lindsey Graham for over a decade. He serves our country as well in the Air Force. He's just a straight shooter. He tells it like it is. He's got his perspective. If you agree with him on this one issue, he'll work with you. If he doesn't, he'll call you out. In this case, he says, listen, I know where the president's gut is on this. He believes in getting the North Korea situation right, and he called out the bias in the media. It's the same thing that happened to John McCain. When John McCain was doing things the Democrats like, the failing New York Times behind us, everybody else, they love him. Give him positive press. The minute they work with Republicans or Trump, now he's the enemy. Now he's two-faced. Now he's turning his back. The duplicity is evident in someone like Lindsey Graham, who is willing to call balls and strikes on certain issues, even if you don't agree with him on everything. So God bless him for speaking truth on another network.
And for just wanting to serve this country. My dad's someone who's been criticized a lot because I think he served 5 different presidents. But what it comes down to is, if you want the best for this country, you got to find a way to work with the people who are in charge. Otherwise, what is it? Just resist, resist,
on
resist?
the issues you can work with them on. Exactly.
Right. And be honest about the ones that you disagree with.
Sure.
And Lindsey Graham is someone who has always been upfront, always been honest. And as you saw there, never afraid to just say it like it is.
True, sir.
Send us your thoughts on that, friends at foxnews.com. But we've got some other headlines I do want to bring you this morning. The neighbor who attacked Senator Rand Paul, leaving him with broken ribs, you remember when that happened, will now spend a month in prison. Boucher was convicted of assault after tackling the Kentucky lawmaker in his yard last year in a fight over lawn debris. A judge ordering Boucher to 1 year of supervised release, a $10,000 fine, and 100 hours of community service. Paul says Boucher should have gotten more jail time. Also, remember this woman who spit on a pro-police demonstrator. Yikes. That woman is now expected to turn herself into Chicago police, a police station later today after the man pressed charges. Fox News cameras capturing that incident at a demonstration in Chicago City Hall last month. Police were protesting Mayor Rahm Emanuel, accusing him of being anti-law enforcement.
Can't just spit on people.
And there's this. Tom Brady throws his support behind NFL national anthem protesters. The New England Patriot quarterback discussing this issue with Oprah.
There were a lot of really good, healthy conversations coming out of it. You respect what other people, you know, I do. I respect why people are doing what they're doing. And they're doing it for different reasons. They can do things for their reason, and you have respect for that. But I thought it was great.
Tom Brady never kneeled for the anthem, and of course his comments come ahead of new NFL rules requiring players on the field to stand.
Tom Brady does one thing really well.
Can't argue with that.
I'll leave it right there.
Can't argue with that.
That's
You know who else does something really well? Rick Regmuth with the weather.
Yeah, he does.
What's up, Rick?
Sometimes.
Thank you for this weather.
Sometimes I said something wrong in the last segment, and yeah, somebody messaged me.
That never happens, Rick. That never happens to us.
Yeah, never. We all say things perfectly all the time. Yeah, no, not always. Hey, take a look at the weather map, show you what's going on. It's really hot all across the central part of the country. This is what it's going to feel like at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. 103 in Minneapolis, 102 in Des Moines, 100 in Chicago, 100 in Dallas. Really baking. It's hot. It's also really humid. So check in on your neighbors, take care of your pets, take care of the elderly all weekend long. Tomorrow, take care of your dad because it's going to be hot all across parts of the plains. Today, across the Northeast, another spectacular day down across the Mid-Atlantic. Tons of sunshine, not that humid. Tomorrow, the humidity begins to kick in a little bit more and the heat comes in as well. Down across parts of the South, there you see those showers across parts of Florida Panhandle. Get ready. Tomorrow, heavier rain moves in. A little bit of a tropical disturbance bombardments we're going to watch potentially later on the week across parts of the western Gulf. Towards the northern plains, we have some storms coming as well. 95 actual air temperature in Minneapolis, and down across the southwest, look at that, 87 in Phoenix with some rain showers. All right, guys, back over to you.
All right, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
The third round of the U.S. Open tees off in just a few hours.
The competition bound to get interesting with just one golfer under par. Several big names already sent packing after missing the cut.
Jared Max live at Shinnecock Hills in New York with what to expect today. Jared, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Pete. Abby, Griff, unbelievable, only one under par, and that's what this course does at Shinnecock Hills. It humbles the rest of the golfers, but not the best in the world. Dustin Johnson, yesterday, he was even better than the day before. Johnson shot 3 under par yesterday. That has him at -4 for the tournament. Here we are 1 week removed from Justify winning the Triple Crown. Well, he's trying to do the same thing, Dustin Johnson, and go wire to wire. You take a look at the leaderboard, and Dustin Johnson 4 shots better than Scott Piercy and Charlie Hoffman. Tommy Fleetwood is one over. Henrik Stenson, Justin Rose, Brooks Koepka, they're all there among the 67 golfers left. Tiger Woods no longer part of this tournament. Tiger Woods improved by 6 shots yesterday, but still +10. He missed his 3rd U.S. Open cut.
I'm not very happy the way I played and the way I putted. I'm at 10 over par. So I don't really can be too happy and too excited about 10 over par.
Meanwhile, Phil Mickelson stays alive in this tournament, but yeah, Jordan Spieth is out, Rory McIlroy is out. One of the great stories of this Open, Matt Parziali, 31-year-old full-time firefighter from Brockton, Massachusetts, made the cut here at the U.S. Open, guys.
That's cool.
That's great.
Yeah, it's going to be a big day today and beautiful weather. Thank you so much, Jared.
Jared, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right, the left taking aim at President Trump for the North Korean summit, but shouldn't they be focusing on whether we are safer now than we were 4 years ago? We are going to debate next.
Plus, more evidence of bias in the FBI, this time against Trump voters, and employees saying they're all poor, uneducated, and lazy. Herman Cain is here to respond. That's coming up next.
Welcome back. Well, time for your news by the numbers. First, 2 weeks. That's how much earlier the DNC is moving up their convention. It will take place July 13th to July 16th in 2020 to maximize exposure. No news yet on whether it will be rigged or not. Next, $200 million. That's how much taxpayers in Illinois will pay to build former President Obama's presidential center. It will cost more than $1.5 billion in total. And our third story, finally, 6. That's how many records retiring NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson broke. She spent 665 days in space, more than any other American. Wow, great stuff. Griff, over to you.
Thanks, Pete. The left takes aim at President Trump once again for the North Korean summit.
This is a handshake, reality TV, photo op summit.
You know, you kind of wonder, like, did we really need a summit to get this document?
Just because something hasn't happened before doesn't mean it's historic.
So we've got a long, long way to go.
But isn't it more important to focus on whether the country is safer now than we were 4 years ago? Here to debate it, former senior foreign policy advisor for Donald Trump, Christian Whitten, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama, Joel Rubin. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
This is a very important decision, a discussion. Joel, let me start with you, because this question points back to 4 years ago. Are we safer today than we were 4 years ago?
We certainly are, and thanks to President Obama's policies, that's how we got to this point. The defeat of the Islamic State in terms of shrinking its space, its ground game, that was organized by the Obama administration, and so this administration has wisely continued on that pace. And the Obama administration did stop Iran's nuclear program in its tracks. Unfortunately, that's under threat now that the Trump administration has pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, so that could be a new threat that we have to deal with. And we're still waiting to see if North Korea will go further on its nuclear weapons program than it already has on Trump's watch. So there's a lot to be thankful for from President Obama.
Christian, I have a feeling you don't agree.
Of course, under the 8 years of Obama, every single foreign threat, the Islamic State emerged, Iran, China, every foreign threat got worse. And the Trump administration, and I was over at the State Department for the early part of the administration, we put pressure on China, pressure on North Korea, beat ISIS by taking the lawyers out of the decision loop and letting our warriors do what they needed to do to defeat ISIS. And in North Korea, in exchange for virtually nothing, Donald Trump has gotten them to stop nuclear testing, stop ballistic missile testing, destroy their engine testing facility, destroy their nuclear test facility at Pyongyang-ri, and you know, agree to disarm. So looking pretty good.
Let me interject this, Joel, and that is, you know, at the end of the day, you both agree that we're safer for different reasons, but the safety of Americans couldn't be more important, and yet the left huffs and puffs over the fact that President Trump is making us less safe. Why shouldn't we go back to the days when politics stopped at the water's edge?
Well, we really should. And the problem is that foreign policy has been politicized. In many ways, President Obama was the first victim of that. He brought a nuclear deal towards completion with Iran that Republicans in the Congress said preemptively they were not going to support, even though there had been bipartisan support for an approach of sanctions and diplomacy for years that he was following on. And so now we're at a point where we don't have the bipartisanship, but there are deep desires for that amongst the national security establishment because threats are on the horizon and there's deep concern about where we're heading.
They sure are on the horizon. Christian, what do you see the administration doing next to keep us safe?
You know, I think we're going to plow ahead, and the president has just announced some very important tariffs on China under Section 301, which is finally pushing back against China's theft of U.S. intellectual property, and also evening some of these trade relationships we have with other countries, with the EU, with Canada and Mexico. All of these countries have much higher tariffs on us than we have on them. So finally fixing that and getting tough with China, increasing the military so we can deter war with China rather than encourage it through weakness.
Christian Whitten, Joel Rubin, thank you very much. An important discussion. Nobody better to talk to you. Have a great Saturday.
Thank you.
All right, more evidence of bias in the FBI, this time against Trump voters. An employee saying they're all poor, uneducated, and lazy. Herman Cain is here to respond next. Plus, seeing double. The Navy isn't happy with Nike's new clothing line logo. Now Nike is taking action. Stay tuned. The DOJ IG report revealing bias in the FBI, this time against Trump voters.
A message by an unidentified bureau employee said Trump supporters are all poor to middle class, uneducated, lazy, POS that think he will magically grant them jobs for doing nothing. They probably didn't watch the debates, aren't fully educated on his policies, and are stupidly wrapped up in his unmerited enthusiasm.
Well, joining us now to react is former CEO of Godfather's Pizza and 2012 Republican presidential candidate Herman Cain. Mr. Cain, thanks for being here this morning. So, how do you react to the revelation that top-level FBI agents classified not just the president but his supporters that way? How could they have been fair in the process?
This is an insult below the belt. I have been poor before I was poor. I know what poor looks like, and so did my dad. My dad wasn't around to vote for Donald Trump, but he would have, because my dad believed in less taxes, less government, and more individual responsibility. What my dad did was work 3 jobs when he had to. So I don't consider that lazy. And we eventually went from poor to where we weren't so poor. So I don't know what they're talking about. And allow me to make one other point. I'm sure that most of the people in the FBI are good, dedicated professionals. You're going to have a few bad apples like the ones who make these kind of statements. I believe someone with this insulting attitude sees the world only through the narrow lens of what they capture in liberal New York, liberal DC, and liberal Hollywood. it doesn't represent the lens of the media for regular people. So I think that they are living in a bubble that they need to get out of.
Herman, there were 5 agents that out of the IG report that were referred for administrative action, but there is clearly a culture of pervasive bias existing at the headquarters. I ask you this question: do you draw now into question the bias in the Mueller investigation?
Absolutely. Rudy Giuliani said it best. The basis for getting the authority, the FISA order, in order to start that was flawed in itself. So if the basis is flawed and biased, they really shouldn't have been able to get it. So yes, it does bring into question the validity of this witch hunt called the Mueller investigation.
You know, going back to that text exchange, calling Trump supporters stupid and lazy, it reminds me of Hillary Clinton on the campaign trail referring to some of the supporters as a basket of deplorables. We all remember that moment. What message do you have for people to better understand maybe the Trump supporters? You're one yourself. Many of them you're friends with. Who are these people? Help better describe who they are.
Deplorables unite. That's my message to them. Here's who those Trump supporters are. I give a lot of speeches across the country, and I spoke to a group in Florida, Jacksonville, just yesterday. You got 2 lenses out there, Abby. One is that very narrow lens that presents America as divided, that presents America in terms of all of the negative stuff that goes on. And then you have that wide lens of the American people who see America through their daily lives. Those are the people that elected Donald Trump, and those are the people that are going to continue to support him and support some of the Republicans, most of them, in November. That's the America that most of us see.
All right, it's an important perspective. Good to have you on this morning.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
More estimates now pointing to a 4% second quarter GDP growth. What does it mean for your bank account? We're going to ask Stuart Varney and a lot more in the last and final big hour of Fox and Friends.